Thanks very much, everybody. Stick around for more from the ACLU of Minnesota.
For years, Women Board has been a proud supporter of the ACLU because we have shared values. Today we gather to celebrate the Minnesota chapter as they have their breakfast with a side of dissent. And we all know the more sides, the better. That's why I suggest to you that in addition to dissent, the ACLU serves up healthy portions of both tenacity and compassion, and that's a recipe for success. We should all be so grateful for the work the ACLU does on our behalf to preserve our civil liberties. Now enjoy your breakfast with a side of dissent.
Good morning and welcome to the ACLU of Minnesota's annual fundraiser, Breakfast with a Side of Dissent. This event supports the work of the ACLU in safeguarding the civil rights and liberties for all of us. I'm Nicole Moen, Chair of the ACLU of Minnesota Board of Directors. Before we get started, I want to take the time to thank our event sponsors and civil liberties advocates. So welcome. I'm delighted to welcome you to this morning's gathering in our homes. It's an especially fitting location because 100 years ago, the ACLU itself was started in a living room. A century ago, against the backdrop of a global pandemic, the founders of the ACLU banded together and organized in response to government crackdowns on protesters, immigrants, and labor organizers. Today, a century later, the ACLU, your ACLU, has grown from the small band of visionaries and idealists to a movement nearly 2 million supporters strong. Over the past 4 years, the ACLU filed an unprecedented 424 legal actions against the previous administration, including 256 lawsuits. We watched the former president do his best, actually his worst, to stay in office despite the cost to our democracy, casting doubt on elections, on our right to vote, on our entire constitutional system of government. The forces that led to the violent insurrection at our Capitol are still out there, spreading disinformation and threatening our democracy. They are conspiring to take away our right to vote. That's why it is so crucial that we keep doing this work to protect the civil rights and liberties of all Minnesotans and all Americans. We know the last few years have been challenging, mentally, physically, emotionally, and financially. While there are many battles left to fight, we want to make sure you know how important your contributions are. Together, with the help of our community partners, clients, volunteers, and your contributions, we are fighting the government's abuses of power, ending government crackdowns on people of color, protesters, and immigrants, supporting racial equity alongside our partners, and of course, protecting the right to vote. Our democracy is at stake. We know that the time of reckoning is now. And at this time of reckoning, we also know that change is more possible now than ever. Together, we can continue to see real change. Together, we can defend democracy. Together, we can take action. Together, we can dissent. So please, sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy this morning's program, Well, you'll hear why your support of the ACLU helps so many and how you can make a difference.
Thanks, Nicole, for the introduction and the coffee. I'm Ben Feist. I'm thrilled to be here this morning having breakfast and coffee with you and addressing you as our Chief Programs Officer and Interim Executive Director. I've been with the ACLU since, let's just say it's been a long time, and I'm excited to address you today for the first time in my current role. It's people like you who allow the ACLU to do our work in protecting and advancing civil rights and civil liberties in this state. We run on donations from individuals. In the past 2 years, individual donations have accounted for around 90% of our total revenue. I think that's pretty unique to the ACLU. We get some grants from foundations and the National ACLU, but as I like to point out, we don't take money from the government because we take them to court. And we do this regardless of which person or which party is in control. Now I'd like to give you some context for what your support has helped fund. Over the last 4 years or so, we've been able to grow this organization and staff up in nearly every department. For example, our legal department has grown from 2 to 8 staff. This allows us to protect and expand civil liberties in the courts, at the legislature, and on the streets. We've been able to work on more sustained integrated advocacy campaigns on priority issues. For example, we've done a lot of work on surveillance, privacy, and technology, including a recent win banning facial recognition technology at the Minneapolis City Council. We've also invested in protecting our elections and making voting more accessible. Let's just say that we had a lot of work to do around the 2020 election. It was all hands on deck with lawsuits, voter engagement, and election protection efforts. We've also been able to react forcefully, even during the pandemic, responding to rampant COVID in prisons, the murder of George Floyd, and the unrest following the killing of Daunte Wright in Brooklyn Center. Now we're going big at the local level in Brooklyn Center, where there's a real opportunity to reimagine policing in that city that can serve as a model for the rest of our state. Our legislative team had amazing victories last session at the Minnesota Legislature, our best session to date actually, passing long-term agenda items like ending driver's license suspensions for unpaid fines and fees, civil asset forfeiture reform, and fixing other issues that stem from the criminalization of poverty. And these are just some of the highlights of the work that you make possible. This morning you'll hear from a few of the folks who are working to make this a more just and equitable state for all Minnesotans. Thank you again for your support and joining the ACLU in this important fight. I hope you enjoy this morning's program.
Every day, you guys are watching out for us, and you're filing the briefs that need to be filed to protect our rights. I can't say enough about how important this work is. It's holding together our democracy at the moment.
I'm attracted to the ACLU as a way of supporting the U.S. Constitution, which I think is a part of what every attorney should be interested in. It's part of our oath of office.
Being an organization as large as we are, as prominent as we are, we take our responsibility seriously and try to utilize our influence to help those who don't have a lot of influence on their own.
Immigration at the border or people at risk to be deported, having ACLU supporting all these causes and pursuing justice is really important for us.
One of the great things about working at the ACLU of Minnesota is the effect that we have on real people's lives.
Often I get calls about people's interaction with police, with imprisonment.
The constitutional protections that we have in this country apply to everyone who's here, regardless of immigration status or class.
You know, these aren't just words written on parchment. These are real tools, these are real shields from oppression.
We are nonpartisan. We are vigilant. And we will protect everybody's constitutional rights from infractions by any administration or any party, both in the past and going forward.
Okay. Thank you. I am press. Please.
As we see, that camera person just got shot.
Shot in the press.
He clearly has press on his helmet right there.
Cops just shot my window out, my passenger side window out. The glass clearly nailed me right here, right here.
They're sighting us in, dude.
Guys, but this is proof. Let's go. Colin, you okay? Okay. Jesus Christ! Get out! Run your wrist! Put it down, put it down. The manager is on your back. Okay. I'm not fighting.
Who were they aiming that at? Like directly at us.
Hey, whoa.
I was just at the 5th precinct with a group of media. There was at least a dozen of us there, TV, still photo, and print. I had my notebook in my hand when the Minnesota State Patrol was advancing on protesters and us. We identified ourselves as press, and they fired tear gas canisters on us at point blank range.
Press! I'm authorized to be here. I am here legally. Press!
Hi, I'm Clare Diegel, a staff attorney at the ACLU of Minnesota, and I know that together we can defend democracy. Protecting our democracy is the very business of the ACLU of Minnesota. We all know that the right to vote is under attack across our nation, and in Minnesota, we not only protected the right to vote, we expanded it. In 2020, we won a settlement to ensure that people with disabilities or people with language barriers can now bring the person of their choice to help them vote at the polls. When the global pandemic threatened in-person voting, we filed suit. And we got the Minnesota Secretary of State to mail 2 million ballot applications to registered voters. And of course, our work is far from done. We are currently fighting to end the systemic disenfranchisement of more than 53,000 Minnesotans who are banned from voting because they are on probation. The Minnesota Supreme Court recently agreed to hear our case, so I promise you, there is more to come. Unfortunately, 2020 also bore witness to alarming assaults carried out by law enforcement against protesters in the wake of George Floyd's murder, people seeking only to exercise their First Amendment rights, as well as attacks on the journalists covering those protests. These journalists were tear gassed, pepper sprayed, unjustly arrested, and brutalized by rubber bullets, leaving one journalist permanently blind. We brought 3 class action lawsuits on behalf of protesters and journalists. When law enforcement again attacked the journalists who were covering protests, this time in Brooklyn Center, we worked around the clock and won a temporary restraining order, stopping those tactics from being used after police killed Daunte Wright. And last but certainly not least, 2020 was the first year of COVID-19. It is hard to imagine a more terrifying place to be during a pandemic than a prison, where people are packed together like sardines. Despite the obvious risks, government authorities and state and local prisons refuse to release vulnerable people or to enforce social distancing and masking requirements for people trapped inside the prison walls. These authorities created an unacceptable risk of illness and death for inmates, guards, and the outside community. That's why we sued 3 times on behalf of incarcerated people in state and federal custody. Our clients presented horrifying stories to the courts. Dante Russell, who was COVID-19 free, was actually put in a small cell with someone infected with the virus. For 3 days, he hid under his blanket, using it to try to shield his face. He was afraid to use the bathroom or even eat. Another client, Carrie Cesares, tested positive for COVID-19 and was then sent to an open, dorm-like building with 100 other women infected with the virus. She described the unit as zombie land, where women with vacant stares lied around, so sick and weak they could not stand up or even dress themselves. These stories need a voice. These battles must be fought. Our courageous clients are only one piece of the puzzle. We also need your support. People like you have allowed us to double our legal team in the past few years to do all the work that must be done. Your support has enabled us to give so many the voice they deserve. So thank you. Thank you for making it possible for us to do more, to hold government accountable, and to fight for our democracy. And thank you for your continued support in the battles yet to come. Next up, you'll hear about our work defending LGBTQ rights and an intern who got an exciting firsthand experience doing just that.
On a hot night in June 1969, police raided the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village, New York. But this time, rather than be arrested, the Queens and street kids fought back. The riots that ensued are considered the beginning of the LGBTQ movement in America. But the movement has much deeper roots. 3 years before Stonewall, in August 1966, trans people at Compton's cafeteria in San Francisco also rioted against the police. Late at night, when trans people congregated there, police would routinely harass them in their sanctuary. But on this night, led by trans women and femmes of color, the community resisted. Similar but lesser-known uprisings occurred in Los Angeles at Cooper's Donuts in 1959, and at the Black Cat in 1967, and in Philadelphia at Dewey's Restaurant in 1965. There are probably many other such events yet to be uncovered. They remind us of our courageous history of resisting institutionalized bullying and oppression. In the decades that followed, trans people largely remained in the shadows, quietly contributing to society. Our community was still denied employment, housing, healthcare, and legal protection, essentially the basic right to live. Yet even when they were criminalized by anti-cross-dressing and anti-loitering laws, our transcestors, including Miss Major, Marsha P. Johnson, and Sylvia Rivera, and Flawless Sabrina, survived. They all spent time in jail because they dared to be themselves when our society made it a crime to deviate from gender norms. But time marched forward, and so did they, passing along their survival strategies. And today, trans people are more visible than ever. Though our lives and bodies are sometimes celebrated, we remain more often targeted. In schools, harassment often forces trans students to drop out. Federal and state governments act as bullies too, now rescinding guidance to schools on how to protect trans students and passing harmful laws banning trans people from common restrooms. Epidemics of homelessness, HIV, and incarceration constrain the survival opportunities for trans women of color. The murder rate of trans women of color increases with every passing year. Rather than invest in our survival, the new administration has attempted to both literally and figuratively delete us and has ignored requests to investigate the escalating violence against us. The murder rate of trans women of color increases with every passing year. Rather than invest in our survival, the new administration has attempted to both literally and figuratively delete us and has ignored requests to investigate the escalating violence against us. Only 18 states explicitly and comprehensively protect trans people from discrimination. Many other state lawmakers are focused on targeting us for more discrimination. In 2017, lawmakers in 22 states introduced more than 50 bills restricting the rights of trans people. Even as these lawmakers signal that we are not worthy of protection, we persevere. Most of us have already spent years in dark places wrestling with our truths, feeling ashamed of who we are. But when we manage to survive and even to love ourselves, we are stronger than ever. Try as they might, these lawmakers cannot erase us. Our rights will be hard won, but we are winning. Our community is resilient and our history of resistance runs deep. Following in the footsteps of Flawless, Major, Sylvia, Marcia, we fight back the way they did. We take care of each other, we tell our stories, and we demand justice. Join the fight in courts, in state legislatures, in the streets, in the voting booths. Resistance is our birthright, the gift passed on from our elders. We carry the lessons of Cooper's, Stonewall, Compton's, and the many strategies that continue to give us hope and life. We have always existed, and we will continue to fight until we are all safe and free.
Hi everyone, my name is Julian. I'm a legal intern at the ACLU of Minnesota. I'm a junior at McAllister College studying political science with a concentration in legal studies. And this summer, I had the opportunity to intern with the legal department here. Specifically, I was brought in to work on a project related to furthering and upholding transgender rights in Minnesota public schools. As you may have heard, in 2020, the ACLU of Minnesota scored a big victory at the appeals court here in Minnesota, where the court ruled in favor of a transgender student who had been segregated from the locker rooms at his high school, solely on the basis of being transgender. But in this ruling, the court decided that the right of a transgender student to use facilities that made them feel affirmed and comfortable was protected by the Minnesota Human Rights Act and the Minnesota State Constitution, which is a big win for transgender students all over the state. So my project rose out of that ruling. For my project this summer, I looked at all of the school districts in Minnesota to see which school districts had policies that protected transgender students consistent with this ruling, and which school districts were failing to protect their students and keeping transgender students vulnerable to bigotry and targeting from school officials. Now, as a transgender man myself, this work is very important to me. I know firsthand how important it is to be able to do something as simple as use the bathroom in a way that's affirming and comfortable. In Minnesota, 75% of transgender students say they feel unsafe at school, according to the Department of Health. 3 in 5 transgender students say they aren't allowed to access the bathrooms aligned with their gender identities. So I was very glad that I had the opportunity to help make progress in that area this summer. I looked at 334 school districts in Minnesota to see what policies they've implemented related to bathroom, locker room, and sports team access. Then I sorted those policies into 2 categories. If a policy met our expectations for gender inclusion, for example, if a bathroom policy explicitly affirmed the right of transgender students to use the bathroom aligned with their identity, that policy went into the satisfactory category. If a policy didn't meet those standards, maybe it left room for discrimination, or it was outright discriminatory, that went into the needs improvement category. And schools that had no policies either way were also recorded. So here's what I found. In Minnesota, there are 9 districts with 1 or more satisfactory policies in either bathrooms, locker rooms, or sports teams. There are 6 districts with 1 or more policies that need improvement. And there are 284 districts with no policies either way. And that 284 is actually a lot scarier than that 6, because that means that in 97% of Minnesotan school districts, transgender students have nothing protecting them. Their safety is left up to individual administrators and school officials, which means that they're vulnerable to targeting and being singled out by staff members with nothing that they can fall back on to protect them. So after collecting this data, I was charged with coming up with an advocacy strategy to try and increase the number of districts with inclusive policies. I'm currently working with ACLU of Minnesota attorneys to put that plan into action. So far, we've had conversations with the Department of Human Rights, Department of Education, and the Attorney General's office. I'm hoping that these conversations lead to concrete action from state agencies, like new statewide advisories for transgender inclusion, or a unified front for lawsuits against discriminatory school districts. I'm so grateful for all that I've learned and so excited to take action and work with state officials, legislators, and constituents like you. Together, we can make a difference. Thank you.
My name is Ismael Dore, and I'm an organizer with the ACLU of Minnesota. Together, we can take action. I know this firsthand. I spent the past year speaking at events, recruiting volunteers, and taking part in live forums. I've attended protests and handed out flyers so people know about their constitutional right to assemble. And I've handed out thousands of cards so people know about their rights if they're approached by police or ICE. Our team of organizers went door to door and held events to increase voter turnout in disenfranchised communities. We didn't do it alone. We worked with allies, volunteers, and the community, because together, we can take action. Together, we can make a difference. I have lived experience of some of the issues we fight for. I know firsthand how the government criminalizes poverty, disproportionately hurting people of color and those at their most vulnerable. For a while, my car was not just my transportation, but my home. It carried everything that mattered most to me. I got parking tickets I couldn't afford to pay, then I got towed and couldn't afford to get my car out of the impound lot. I saved and saved and saved, and by the time I finally had enough, I learned that my car had been sold along with all its contents. I lost everything. On top of that, those fines piled up. I owed thousands of dollars. The court eventually worked out a payment plan for me. But no one should have to choose between housing and food or paying tickets and fines. Through intensive lobbying, by organizing for several years, we got a bill passed to change this at the Capitol. It was a significant step toward ending the criminalization of poverty, and something also very meaningful for me personally, as I can be rest assured that other Minnesotans will not have to face similar difficulties that I struggled to overcome. But we still have a lot of work to do until we can end these unjust practices. Together, we can take action. Together, we're already making a difference.
Putting American citizens into concentration camps on the basis of race is unforgivable.
Unanimous opinion of the Supreme Court said separate educational facilities are inherently unequal.
And that is the right of Richard and Mildred Loving to go to sleep at night knowing that the sheriff will not be knocking on their door in the privacy of their bedroom.
A Fordist declared that neither students or teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate.
In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court today legalized abortion.
It's our position that everybody in the village of Skokie and everywhere else in the country has First Amendment rights.
I wanted to tell you what marriage meant to me, why we want it and why we need it.
Not even the government can defeat a community so full of life, color, diversity, and most importantly, love.
How do we speak up? Vote! How do we speak up? Vote!
And the only way to protect anyone is to protect everyone.
This bill is unconstitutional and violates the fundamental constitutional rights of women in this country.
How many more children are we willing to subject to a lifetime of pain? It is not temporary, it is forever!
Let today be the last day that you ever doubt Black trans power.
Put your fist in the air for George!
One nation! One nation! We rise! We rise! I will never stop talking about my abortion!
If you ask, will we fight?
ACLU! ACLU!
Yes, we will fight!
What a powerful demonstration of the work of the ACLU over the last 100 years. There is much to be hopeful for, and yet we cannot rest. Democracy is on the line. Together, we can defend democracy. Together, we can take action. Together, we can dissent. Now we need to stand together to save our democracy, and we cannot do that without your support. We ask that you make a gift that is meaningful to you by texting ACLU-MN, that's ACLU-MN, to 41444, 41444, or by going online to aclu-mn.org/donate. And please know that every gift matters. And of course, the more we raise, the more we can support our work of protecting and promoting the civil liberties of all Minnesotans and all Americans. One of our generous supporters has put forward a $50,000 matching gift, and we are so grateful for their continued support of the ACLU. What that means is that for every donation we receive, your gift will be matched dollar for dollar up to $50,000. Let's take advantage of this incredible opportunity to double your impact today. Thank you for joining us this morning, for your donations, and for all you do, and for helping us advance civil liberties at this vitally important turning point.
Thanks for attending Breakfast with a Side of Dissent. I'm Larry McDonough, a volunteer with the ACLU of Minnesota. I support the ACLU of Minnesota because it works to protect the interests of people who are disfavored and marginalized. I'm here to play some music of the pianist Bill Evans, a descendant of Welsh and Carpo-Tharusi immigrants. I recorded these pieces on my new CD, Kind of Bill on the Palace Grounds. The first piece I'll perform is Waltz for Debbie, that Bill composed in 1953.